Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Loren Mayor. When Loren's team reached out about Loren guesting on the show, it was a very quick and very easy yes. For decades, Loren's work and her legacy have been guided by her values of impact, strategic problem solving, and connection. Her secret leadership sauce will help you think more deeply and intentionally about what it means to show up in your gifts and in service of meaningful work. As the Chief Operating Officer of the World Wildlife Fund, Loren ensures the organization delivers on its strategy to create a world where people and nature live in harmony. She oversees strategic partnerships, operational functions, and resource mobilization teams while strengthening workplace culture and advancing the World Wildlife Fund's mission with external stakeholders. Prior to her time at WWF, Loren was the president of operations at National Public Radio, yes, NPR, where she oversaw the full suite of organizational operations and identified new business opportunities, developing NPR's strategic plan and building a strong, empowering culture. Before NPR, Loren held leadership roles at PBS and worked with clients in the nonprofit and media sectors during her tenure at McKinsey Company. Loren is a graduate of University of Chicago and has a Ph.D. in theater, yes, theater, which we talk about, from Northwestern University, where she also serves as a visiting assistant professor. Listen in to hear Loren share how she is leaning into connection in this season of chaos and uncertainty, this endless season, I should say, of chaos and uncertainty. She then shares her journey from a Ph.D. in theater to becoming the COO of one of the world's largest environmental organizations. She talks about the value of building a nonlinear career that focuses on impact strategy, problem solving, and connection. She talks about what it means to really be smart that doesn't necessarily relate to expertise. She talks about leaders and how strong leaders balance priorities in professional environments and in the overlap of personal and professional realms. She gives us 3 key steps to take when leading through a crisis, and we dig into how to stay humble and open as you grow in your leadership. I loved this conversation. I'm so grateful to Loren for taking the time for joining us and sharing her wisdom and her experience. This was a fun and really fascinating conversation. I know you're going to learn a few things. You're going to want to take some notes on this one. So please join me in welcoming Loren Mayor to Shameless Leadership. Loren, welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm so excited to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to dig into all the things you've done in leadership, and especially you have such an expansive leadership background in the nonprofit space, which I know we'll get into. But before we get into all that, I would love to just connect with you on how you are right now, really, in this world that is just so wildly unpredictable and chaotic. How are you staying afloat right now, and what maybe words or themes are creeping in for you as in this role in a season of chronic crisis in the nonprofit space?
Yeah, what a good question. And I think it's hard for all of us to say how we're doing right now.
Yeah.
It is such a chaotic time, but I feel so fortunate given the seat that I'm in that I actually feel really energized by the opportunities that we have to make a difference right now. And I think to your point about what word or theme, I think the thing that really stays with me and motivates me is connection. Is this idea of being connected. We certainly know from conservation that whole ecosystems are incredibly interdependent. And I think as people, we are too. And it's those connections to the people around us that really pull you through at times like this. I know I feel like the more smart people I have in a room together, the better decision making we're going to do, the better ideas we're going to have. And I feel really fortunate to have so many good, smart people in my work and in my life.
I love that. I was just listening to an interview this morning, and there was this clip from Jane Fonda who quoted Anne Lamott, who said, and they were talking about maintaining hope in seasons where hope can feel sparse. And Jane quoted this Anne Lamott quote that was something along the lines of, if you want to be hopeful in hard seasons, then do something hopeful. And I think what you're talking about is finding connection, maintaining connection, and being intentional about being in rooms with people who are doing great things. That's doing something hopeful and continuing to show up. And maintaining, which we're going to talk about power in a little bit, but it's maintaining your sense of power when the world might make you feel a little powerless otherwise.
Yeah, and so important to do.
Yeah, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your career journey and how you go from having a PhD in theater to leading one of the largest environmental organizations currently, but you also have, touched in other large-scale nonprofit spaces along the way. So how does this begin in theater and end here where we're at right now?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a circuitous path.
Mm,
But I often say it's one of those things that it makes more sense when you look back than it necessarily did as I was walking through it. So
right.
um, I'll walk you through a little bit. So I start, as you said, I have a PhD in theater history. And when I was studying for that, people would always be like, what are you going to do with that? And I felt like, well, a PhD is not going to hurt me.
Yeah.
So I started out teaching, but I like to say I was never a very traditional theater historian, if such a thing exists. Like, I was
Mhm.
not interested in deep textual reads of Shakespeare. I
Yeah.
was really interested in theater in a interdisciplinary way, and particularly theater as a tool for economic development.
Mm.
So I was interested in how do you take lots of pieces of data, urban planning, urban studies, zoning laws, theater texts, and put them together, economic theory, to tell a story and make sense of something. And um, because I always thought that way, I was actually at a dinner party one night and I was talking about how I like to do this kind of big problem solving. And I was sitting with somebody who said, if that's the way you like to think, you should really work where I work, which was a big consulting company called McKinsey.
Mm.
And at the time, I didn't know anything about it, but I was like, yeah, that's what I like to do. And so I was able to make this big pivot to McKinsey. And when I went there, I thought, this is how I'm going to really have impact at a large scale. I'm going to work with big companies and I'm going to reinvent myself into this other person. Like, I'm not going to be this artsy person. Maybe I'm going to be big into manufacturing or finance. But while I was there, we had a lot of clients who were in the nonprofit space, who were in the media space, and I kept being drawn to those kind of projects. And so
Mm.
I really ended up focusing on strategic thinking around media and nonprofits. And it was the same, like, take lots of data, put it together in interesting ways. And from there, I got introduced to the world of public media. And I left and I went to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, now defunct, where I did a lot of work in operations and strategy. And then the public media space is a great space, and I was able to move within that. I left from there and I went to PBS, where again I did strategy and operations roles, and moved from there to NPR, where I started in strategy and ended up as basically the COO, the president of operations. And
Wow.
I loved being in the media space. I feel like public media is incredibly important in this country, having local media, really important educational media, and particularly having strong journalism that's local and national. It's such a treasure for us. And I loved being at NPR and I loved supporting that work.
Yeah.
But at some point, when I would go home at night, the thing that would keep me up, it wasn't about freedom of the press, as important as that is. It was about the state of the planet. And
Mm.
I just felt like that's the issue that I really feel like I need to be involved in. And I was very fortunate that my boss here at WWF, the CEO, said, you don't have a conservation background, but you've got all the operational piece. You can learn conservation. And I was able to make this transition. So it feels a little, bumpy, but I
Mhm.
think when I think about my career, there's a couple of through lines for me. So one is I've always had a desire to make impact in my work. So whether that was impact in teaching and in the classroom, or working with big companies and trying to see how you can shift strategy, or working in media, or in the space of journalism, or now in the environment, impact is that through line for me.
Yeah.
The other thing is I love puzzles and problem solving. I love being able to see lots of kinds of information and put them together. It's true all the way back to the kind of work I was doing in theater history, and it's still true today. I mean, the thing that's great about a COO spot is you get to see the whole all around you, and you get to see all the parts and figure out how to make them, get the sand out of the gears so it can move more smoothly.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is just connection. I've always wanted to be with a group of like-minded people back where we started, right? Trying to do something hopeful. And that goes all the way back to, I started out by doing plays, and that feeling of doing something together. It's the night before the performance. You don't have enough money or enough resources. You're up late trying to make something amazing happen. I still get that feeling, in my job today, that we're just this band of like-minded people really trying to do something good.
Oh my gosh. I love this journey and the through lines. And I totally agree with you that in looking in hindsight, we can see these clear through lines and themes, and that were there from the very beginning. But when you start out at the beginning, you would never guess that starting at point A would have gotten you to where you're at today. I'm a sociology major. Similarly, like, what will one do with that? Like, the possibilities are endless, and also nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have a similar sense of looking back. It's very clear. I can see through lines very clearly, but I would have never guessed that this is where I would have landed. So I think it's fun to look back. I also think, when we're thinking about leadership, and especially women in leadership, when we recognize some of our capabilities and how those capabilities carry across roles, across careers, across industries, we give ourselves so much more power to make pivots, and we give ourselves, I think, permission to really go for things that maybe on paper don't look really obvious. And you alluded to that in going for, and having an opportunity to go for this role that you're in now, and on paper thinking where it might not have been obvious how you're getting from NPR over here, that when these components around, I'm good at doing, I'm good at seeing strategy, I'm good at problem solving for impact, I'm good at making connections. If I'm solid in those areas, is it industry dependent? Maybe not so much. And I think that women in particular can really limit ourselves in thinking that we have to connect dots in a really linear fashion. And I love the idea of zooming out and looking at what are the things I'm really great at, and how can those things take me wherever it is I want to go, even if it isn't in a linear path that someone else might, that we might traditionally see.
Yeah. Can I just build on that
Please.
for a
Yeah.
second, just to say, I think one of the things I learned by moving in my career, when I started, I thought being smart was being an expert, right? I had expertise in theater history. I studied it for a really long time. I thought that's what made me smart.
Yeah.
But when I changed jobs, I realized, like, actually being smart is figuring out how to do that problem solving, how to navigate new situations, how to work with different people. And that's a different way of seeing your skills. And that
Yeah.
was really helpful to me.
Yes. Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah. And that you don't have to be, and that, again, permission to step out of, you don't have to be a subject matter expert to be really smart and bring something really important, significant to the table. In fact, sometimes maybe it's helpful to not be the subject matter expert, because then you can you have an open-mindedness and a different point of view to bring something different to the table.
That's right. That's one of the things that I think I've learned. It's hard because you have to acknowledge, I don't know. Like, I don't know the substance of what you're talking about. I'm going to ask a question that might make me seem vulnerable or not as competent. But sometimes asking that question, other people in the room had that too, where you uncover something that's meaningful for the discussion.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about your role as COO and balancing priorities, and how do we, and this is obviously going to be really specific to a COO role, but I also think this is specific to anyone in leadership in any kind of rank, role, capacity. And especially if you are a primary caregiver of, whether it's children, aging parents, and, I'm 50.
All the above.
Yeah, I'm 50. I have a teenager. I have a 13-year-old and an 87-year-old mom. And so there's a lot of priorities every day. So how do you balance priorities, especially when everything feels like it's the most important thing, where there's so many competing priorities? And maybe that's even personally and professionally, whatever that might look like for you. But when it isn't always really clear where things fall in line.
Yeah. I think I would answer that almost in two ways, right? There's how do you in work prioritize? And then there's how do you take work and life and prioritize among them, right? So at work, I think for me, it's really important to have goals, to know what you're trying to achieve, and to have, for me, a sense of the near term and the longer term. So it's easy to get caught up in the urgent stuff on your near term to-do list, but what did I say I really want to get done in this quarter or by the end of this fiscal year? And trying to keep reminding yourself of that so that you stay focused on those really important things. I think that helps. I think another thing in my role, because my remit is quite large, it's really important to ask myself, what can I uniquely add value to? Because I'm curious about a lot of things, and I could spend my time digging into a lot of things. I think they're all really interesting, but I don't have enough capacity for that. So where is it that, given my role or my expertise, I can really add the most value myself as opposed to somebody else? And to do that, it's really helpful to have a great team, and a team that you really trust. I worked for a CEO in a previous job who I remember saying to me he felt like his team was rowing against him, that every time he turned his back, people were going in an opposite direction. And it's really hard to sort of manage if that happens. It's great to have a team that is going to carry the work in the direction that you've all established. And then I would say sometimes a crisis does really help. A crisis is super clarifying around priorities. You can have a really busy day and a crisis happens, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, all those things I thought were important, like, nope, all of them can wait, or somebody else can do all of those. And sometimes even when I'm not in a crisis, I try to play that little game with myself to be like, okay, what is it that really, really matters today?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I would just say on the work-life balance piece, I think it's really hard. I was in a mentorship program a while ago, and I had somebody come to me, and she had this beautiful list of like life goals and work goals, and they were literally on two separate pieces of paper. And I was like, it doesn't work that way. You're one person. So you have to figure out how you bring those things together. And I think it's hard. I've been really fortunate. I have a very strong support network behind me. And I've had great colleagues and bosses who have understood the importance of having commitments and priorities outside of work and supporting that. I think that really, really matters. And then I think at the end of the day, it's also helpful to know if there's really a crisis, life is always going to win. You can wake up in the morning, have a busy day, have all these important meetings, think it's the most important thing in the world, and somebody calls you and they need to go to the emergency room. There's no question about what you're going to do.
Right. Absolutely. I have to shout out your team, who I've had the opportunity to interact with, because when you talk about having great people, supporting you, I've noticed how your team has been so helpful, supportive, and protective in the background, which is so key. So I know that people have different or different layers of support around them, but having people that just are looking out for you and helping you manage your time and manage priorities, I think can be huge, and giving people that leeway to say like, hey, here's how I need, please manage me. Like I've said that before to my team members, like, I just need you to manage me in this, and like, tell me what to do at this time, which can be really, really helpful. I want to touch on the recognizing what's most important right now. And I really loved what you said about acknowledging there's so many things you're interested in, and there's so many, like, if you had endless time and resources, how would you spend it? And one of the things I love talking with my coaching clients about is what's a yes right now, and what's not a yes right now, and having like these kind of two distinct columns of, I know eventually I want to put time into this, but that's not my yes right now. My yeses right now are these things. And sometimes we're looking at this on an hour-to-hour basis, but sometimes we're looking quarterly or annually for, these are the things I need to focus on right now for this season. And here's something else that I have a lot of interest or passion around. And that's a Q4 thing, or a 2027 thing, or maybe it's a 2030 thing. We don't have to let go of those things, but recognizing where things fit right now, and then where things can fit down the road. And I know I think about this a lot as I'm finishing up a master's program, and then also, have a teenager and who plays select baseball, and like, and I'm like, okay, like there's a season for this, and then there's seasons for other things that are coming down the road. And I just get excited about the things that I will have time opening up for down the road. And that feels exciting. And so I'm guessing that you have some of that too, where it's, okay, this is where I'm focused right now. And here's some things I see down the road, and giving yourself permission to hold space for both of those.
Yeah, I I've said before, I am an ambitious person. I want to make an impact, but I feel very fortunate that I have this belief that life is long. Um, and
I love
you
that.
have time to do many things, and you can't always do them all at the same time. Like
Yeah.
when I had very young kids, I was like, this person, this body, this can only do so much. I'm not sleeping. I want to give my all to work, but maybe this is not the moment where I'm absolutely going to raise my hand for everything.
Yeah.
But there'll be a moment for that because you have lots of chapters and lots of opportunities, and you
Yeah.
don't have to do it all exactly at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly. Speaking of things moving quickly and managing priorities, how do you pause to take care of your people when the pace of work and news is moving so quickly? And I feel like we wake up to a new crisis every day right now. I mean, speaking of like having to show up in a crisis, I'm sure you can turn on the news any day and find a way to connect the work that you're doing directly to some sort of national crisis. So how do you take care of people in that pace of work when things are moving so quickly, and making sure that you're really seeing and holding space for the people that are right in front of you?
Yeah, thanks. People are the most important asset in any organization. So, you ask the question like, how do you pause? And for me, it's not about pausing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really core. And I feel very fortunate in my role. In my role as COO, it's about making sure that we are taking care of our people. That is
Mm-hmm.
sort of first, second, and last order of business.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of ways to do that. And those are my like now priorities,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that includes making sure that people have the training and the resources and the development so that they can do their best work. It's something here at WWF, we put a lot of effort on manager training because one of the things we know is people's experience of their job is so linked to their direct manager. And most managers don't get a lot of training.
Yeah.
They're like, either I had a good boss and I want to be like them, or I had a bad boss and I don't want to be like them. And that's
Yep.
kind of what most of us got. And so really helping people get what they need, that's one thing. I think a second thing is recognizing that people come to work carrying so much, right? People bring so much with them. And you have to make space for that. You have to understand that the events all around us, they're affecting us all and they're affecting us differently.
Mm-hmm.
So here we've created these employee resource groups to try to give people an opportunity to come together and to create intentionally create those spaces to recognize that you might not be okay today. You might not be
Mm-hmm.
able to be super productive or really present in a meeting. And that's okay. And we need to recognize that and help people sort of work through that, again, that point of connection. I
Yeah.
think articulating values, really having everybody understand what the organization values and that we value them and their unique contributions and their whole selves, I think is really important, and demonstrating that as leaders. And then being transparent about what's happening and making sure people understand sort of what's needed all around them. All of those things I think help when times are really challenging for people to feel grounded, connected to the place where they work, and like they have, a real sense of commitment and connection.
I love you mentioned values there, but I feel like also in what you just shared, you demonstrated a ton of different values that like you're upholding values in the statement that you made. When I'm working with teams, and I actually am working with a handful of teams right now who have some newer and emerging leaders on the team. And one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about is not just what are your values, because people typically can identify values fairly quickly, but how do you demonstrate those values, and how can you be thinking aspirationally about how you want to continue demonstrating those values? And I think that's where, when we are especially in highly chaotic seasons, that we have the opportunity to really think through, oh, okay, if these are my values, how am I going to demonstrate them today? How am I going to uphold them today? How am I going to make sure that that I'm walking into this interaction in a way that upholds my values rather than undermines my values? And to your point about leaders doing people feeling like they have leaders who are great models or not models at all for them. I think that's where, if you do that reasonably well, certainly doesn't have to be perfect, you get to be in that position to be one of those great leaders for someone else. And if you have no awareness around how you're upholding your values when you walk in to interactions on a day-to-day basis, I think you can quickly spiral downward and undermine the values that might be up on the wall right over your head every single day, and fall into that category of being a leader that people are not going to want to emulate or feel that they have the opportunity to grow under.
Yeah. And the good news is you have 100 opportunities every day to do that, right? Each new exchange, how you show up to a meeting, all of that, you get to sort of restart it over and over again.
Absolutely. I just was recording a podcast episode about communication skills, and I was talking about, because again, how many times a day are you communicating? So it's like, what are you doing most frequently? It's not about like, oh, I said that thing yesterday and now everything's over. It's more like, no, you said the thing yesterday, maybe not your best moment. And you know what? You're going to have 30 more times within the next hour after you said that thing. Right. So how are you thinking about what you're doing most consistently, rather than the one time that something doesn't come out right, or something doesn't go the way that you would have wanted it to, or as the best reflection of yourself.
Yeah.
When we talk about people advancing in leadership, I find that oftentimes leaders, the women leaders that I'm working with, either have a really clear vision of themselves moving, like going all the way to the top, or they start to get their feet wet in a certain direction and things get a little dicey. This is often under the leadership of someone who maybe doesn't uphold their values in the best way. And they can quickly decide, this isn't for me, or I don't want to, maybe I was not cut out to be a leader. What advice do you have for someone who is seeking rising in leadership, and especially if they're thinking that they want to make it to those executive levels of leadership, they want to step into the C-suite? What kind of vision should they be holding for themselves? How can they keep going, especially if there's times, moments, seasons where things feel challenging and they might question if that's the right move for them, or if they actually have if there's a place for them to have a seat at the table?
So it's a really good question. And I think people ask themselves that all the time. I will say for me, it comes back to wanting to have impact. So it's been less about, I want X role, and more that I want to be able to contribute in a more and more meaningful way. And the way I do that is by being at different tables or having access to different information. And that feels important to me and meaningful. And so it's worth figuring out how I show up in those places to get there. So for me, it's always been a little bit more external, right? That's driving why I want that. I think if it's just about, I want a title, I think that's harder, because then if you can be in a negative workspace where you're not happy and you don't feel valued. And if it's just about a desire for some kind of validation, I think it's hard to stay motivated and to feel like it's worth it there. So I think for me, it's been about finding those places, that mission where it's really going to matter.
That makes so much sense. And when I think about my own career pivots over time, it really has been impact driven. And even sometimes if I've looked at like, oh, I want this title, role, thing, something in this field versus that field, sometimes it's looked a little more surface level. But when I zoom out, as we talked about a little bit ago, if I'm zooming out and looking at what really brings the most meaning to me, it is the opportunity to have impact in a really specific way. And if we can keep track of that impact and how we want to have impact, I think that often gives us so many answers. I'm thinking of someone I was working with who was new in leadership in nursing, in a nursing healthcare capacity. And she was really questioning, like, maybe this isn't for me. She was working in a startup, healthcare startup. And I could tell she was really good at what she did, but she felt very overwhelmed by just the startup environment. And as we talked more about what drove her and what she felt excited about and I could tell that she really wanted to have impactful outcomes, especially for moms and infants. And so I could see this where her like desire to have impact was. And I wanted to like just plead with her, like, don't give up because this industry needs you to do this. And maybe leadership in this capacity or in this startup or in this place, maybe that's not the right fit for you. But if this is the goal, if impact in this direction is the goal, and this is so needed right now, there's absolutely a place for that to have, for you to be able to have impact in that direction, and to be able to scale that impact if you find the right place for you to lead.
I also think people have a bunch of skills, and sometimes your skills and your sensibility mesh really well with an environment, and
Yeah.
sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very painful when they don't, because you have to go into work every day almost pretending to be somebody else or putting on some armor to kind of like fight your way
Hmm.
through. Um, those have been not the best work environments for me, and then
Yeah.
you find yourself somewhere else where you're like, oh, I can really breathe, right?
Yeah.
The things that are my strengths are valued here. It's just so much easier in that space. So I think I would say, not every place is the right place for every person. And that's not a judgment, right? That's about finding the right match for you where you're going to do the best.
Absolutely. I recently was doing a keynote on women in ambition, and I was talking about women rerouting ambition. And I think that we're in this season where we get to look at, is the path I'm on right now the path that I want to stay on? Or am I on a path that was maybe fed to me a little bit, and where I've gotten like my point of view has gotten, or my perspective has gotten so narrow because I'm just doing like whatever I think the next step, quote unquote, should be, and missing out on all this other stuff that's just right outside my door that I'm unaware of, or that I haven't given thought or consideration to. And I've had a handful of clients as I've been talking about this who are like, oh, so like I don't have to stay in this tech company or this role or on this team indefinitely. Like I can take this somewhere else and make a pivot. And I think that we're in a season where women are increasingly being invited to reroute their ambition, to think about like, do I want to be in this space where I'm the only woman on the team, or where I'm in Seattle in tech and or surrounded by tech in Seattle. And so I'm seeing a lot of women recognizing, oh, I could go over here and in a different organization with a team that's full of women leaders. And that's a completely different feel and experience. And that feels really, really exciting.
I had a good friend a long time ago say to me, sometimes you think what's really hard is when you're walking down a path and you come to a fork in the road and you have to decide, do I go this way or do I go this way? And she said, I think actually the hardest thing is when you're walking down a path and it doesn't end. And you
Yeah.
have to stop and say, this is not the path I want to be on. I actually want to find a different way to go, where there's nobody forcing you to do that. There's no markers for it, but it's about what's best for you. And that really stayed with me, right? It's to your point. You don't have to stay on that path just
Yeah.
because you're on it. If you're not, if it's soul sucking, that's not the place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, I think, a scary and daunting realization to think, oh, I don't have to stay on this path, but if there's not a why in the road, what am I how am I building my own right turn? And I think that can be really intimidating, and also ultimately the most freeing thing ever.
I think it comes back a little bit to what we were talking about, like what makes you smart, right? What are the
Yeah,
skills that you have to think about that for yourself? It helps you figure out what that other path might entail.
absolutely. And it goes back to, I mean, what you mentioned earlier, strategic problem solving impact, like it's leaning right back into those
Yeah.
components. Love that. Can we talk a little bit about leading in crisis? And as we are, I have a lot of leaders who are becoming quickly, whether by choice or by chance, experts in change management and change leadership. Um, so what do you hold on to? And what's your North Star when leading through crisis, through change? And how are you ensuring that you're taking care of your people, yourself, the components of the organization that you're responsible for when the stakes feel so high?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like anybody who's been in a leadership role in the last 5 or 6 years, this is what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many different things coming at us. I don't think I feel lucky, but I've managed through a number of crises in my career already. When I was at NPR, the Me Too movement was going on. We've
Oh,
managed
wow.
through COVID here at WWF. So it is really helpful to have that kind of experience and to figure out how to walk your way through it.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, there have been a couple of things that have been really important to chart the path. And the first one is about listening. It's so important when things are challenging to stop and to listen to the people around you. Um, when I was at NPR, one of the things we said about our mission was that listening was an act of love, right? That's right. People listen to NPR, they love it, they donate because they love it. That act of listening is so
You can
important.
feel that in NPR. You can
Yeah.
feel the act of love for
Yeah.
sure.
But I think it's the same in any kind of leadership role. You have to take the time to really understand what the issues are, because if you're in a leadership role, you see things from one perspective and you're missing the whole. So that, I think, is critical. And it really helps you navigate. I think a second piece is really transparent communications, that ability to really make the time. I think one of the things we say in our management training is you've got to make your thinking visible. And it's very easy for that thinking to be invisible to a lot of staff members. And so you
Yeah.
have to create those spaces. When I was at NPR and we were going through a difficult time, one of the things I started doing was just sending a note to all staff once a week, just on everything that we were doing, just a way to make sure people knew. And here, when COVID hit and we went remote, we started holding these Ask Us Anything meetings with the whole staff, just a way to have this kind of dialogue so people could really engage. And
Yeah.
I am, and the team, we were very clear, like, this is an experiment. We don't know, right? Nobody's done this before. We're not going to have all the answers or get it right, but to have a space to be sort of human with each other, to see people trying to assume good intent, really, really important. And then I think the ability to be clear about what you're trying to do or where you're trying to go. What are the building blocks? What are the steps that we're taking? And to communicate about that over and over again really helps people understand that you're trying to move through a situation and not just be trapped in the middle of it.
Oh, those were so good.
Hard one.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely hard. And I think when we can reduce something to a formula, it can be such a gift. And not that crisis is simple enough to be reduced to a formula, but I think that sometimes when we have these key components that we can lean into, it can provide some structure to something that feels so big and overwhelming and sometimes insurmountable. I want to touch on making your thinking visible. I think that that's something that I love the way I love when you said transparency. I'm nodding my head yes, but when you said it in the way of making your thinking visible, that's a layer or a way I haven't heard transparency talked about. And I've been thinking about some research I'm doing for grad school around disagreement and communication. And one of the pieces of research I was looking at was talking about is conversation around disagreement and conflict that many of us are very avoidant of, is that actually just thinking? Like, we get so worked up about, I don't want to be in conflict. And so we just don't say anything. We're all very conflict averse. And is our ability to enter into hard conversations and have that back and forth and those ask me anything, like town hall meetings in the middle of a crisis, which can feel scary and overwhelming and vulnerable. And, what are we walking into kinds of moments? But is that really thinking in a group way? And what are the benefits of that? And what do we lose when we don't open the doors to let that happen? And then what are the potential outcomes that we're missing out on? So I love that framing.
Yeah. Can I just add a
Please.
couple things? One, I think people sometimes get scared because they're like, I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
So I can't open up because I don't have the answers. And it was very freeing to realize it's okay not to have the answers, right? It's okay to say that and to be in it, to be in that kind of conversation together. Actually, you can get there together. I think that's really important. The other point I wanted to make too it's true in crisis, but I think it's true anytime, is about really being aware in a leadership role of the power dynamics and how they come to play. Because I think what I've realized is, as leaders, you come into any space with a certain amount of power. And many of us don't see ourselves that way. In my head, I'm 17. Like, that's who I am. I don't.
With all
I
the
don't,
insecurities that
yeah,
go with a 17-year-old.
I don't see myself walking in, right, with
Right.
this sort of role and title or whatever. And
Yeah.
this really got hit home for me in my last job. We were having a difficult time, and somebody came into my office to tell me that something was wrong. And this woman came in, and she was so tough and she was so cool. She was like the person my 17-year-old self was totally intimidated by and wanted to be, and she came in and she was strong and she told me like how it was and what was going on. And I was incredibly grateful. It was very helpful. She left, and some point later she came back and she said to me, I was really upset that you didn't tell me that I was brave. And I thought, you're so cool. You're so tough. Like, what are you talking about? That you're brave. But I realized, our building had multiple floors. She got on the elevator. She came to the executive level. She walked down the hall into my office, my space, with everything that comes with my role. And she said something vulnerable. And I didn't, until she pointed it out, I didn't realize how much bravery that took. And it really shaped my thinking to recognize, like, it's important to think about the power dynamics in all the rooms. When you have power, you tend not to see it. And how do you make space for the people with the least power to make sure that they are comfortable being able to say the thing or do their best work so that you're gonna work through something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's because we're scared of what we're going to hear, what feedback we might get. We don't open the door to hearing to hearing from people that are the most important people to hear from, to hearing from the people who might be a few floors below us, figuratively and literally. And there's so much richness that can get missed out on. And then to be able to honor the people who do take the opportunity to step up and say something. I've found that in my 20s, when I would get feedback in a performance review, I would want to rebuke, every point that we need you to work on this. And I would want to explain, well, no, I do it that way because of this reason. And I'm not really doing it wrong. Let me tell you why. And I remember a boss at one point being like, I need you to just listen to the feedback. We're not here to spar. And so, which was so embarrassing because then I realized that what I was doing. But now decades later, when someone gives feedback or says oh, I wish you did it this way, or I expected this, or here's how you could have shown up better, I try to just be really grateful and thank you so much, and let the defenses take a back seat so that I can really listen to what was the thing I needed to hear there. I didn't think of it that way. I didn't think of it through their lens. I didn't think how uncomfortable that might have been for them, or to your I'm feeling like my insecure 17-year-old self, and I thought you were the cool person who knew everything, and I didn't consider that maybe that was the situation was a reversal of that. So I think that stepping in and holding space for that humility is such a great skill to have. But I also think that it's something that's so important to be modeling for the leaders for the people who are going to deem us as great leaders and follow in our footsteps. Oh my gosh, what if more of us were modeling that humility and openness to learning and hearing from everyone and accepting feedback, and what would happen in terms of regenerative leadership if that was more present?
Yeah.
With that, I want to talk a little bit about, in our last few minutes here, specific to the role that you're in now and this passion that you have for conservation and science. What have you learned, and what do you wish that people understood more about the conservation and environmental sector? And maybe this is perfect for people who right now have a personal interest in this or personal passion and think they're not qualified to make a career shift into this arena, but maybe they are. Maybe you'll enlighten them.
Well, I could answer that in a couple ways. I mean, I think one of the things that's been the most eye-opening for me coming into the world of conservation is just recognizing the centrality of nature in everything that we do and everything that we are, right? I think it's very easy to think about nature as this thing that kind of surrounds us. I go out into nature, but the reality is that nature is the thing that sustains us. So, you know, healthy oceans that are full of life, they provide 50% of the world's oxygen. They feed 3 billion people. 3/4 of the world relies on forests for food and fuel and medicine. 63% of our medicines come from nature. And I think we don't see that. It's kind of invisible to us. And we don't value nature. We don't put a price tag on it, but it is actually priceless. And we ignore that at our own peril. And I think that
Yeah.
I just didn't see the nature all around and in a way that I do now, right? I'm sitting at a wooden table. It came from a tree, right? My clothes, everything here is connected to the natural world, and we feel so far apart from it, but we are so intertwined.
Yeah.
If you'll forgive me, we just did a new strategy here, and we did something a little unusual. We started with a poem about nature. Can I tell you our nature poem?
Oh, please do.
Thank you. I'm gonna read it. So, this is our poem. Nature is the most valuable resource we have. It sustains life. It fights disease. It reduces poverty. It moderates the winds and the seas. It enables prosperity. It allows for peace. It brings us joy and feeds our soul. We are nature, and nature is us. We need nature, and nature needs us now.
So
And
good.
it's been such an inspirational way to kind of start. And I think that is really at the core of why we do the work and what we're trying to do. To your point of anybody can be a conservationist, yes, it's connected to all of us. And I would just say, you don't have to be a scientist or a biologist to contribute to the world of conservation. Those aren't my skills. I have operational skills. People have fundraising skills. There's all kinds of ways to contribute to the mission of an enterprise, whether it's conservation or any topic.
Right. I want to go back to the poem for a minute. I love the reciprocity in that poem, that there's such a level of partnership that I think maybe we don't always think about when we're thinking about ourselves relative to the environment, relative to conservation. So thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up here, can you tell us in what ways you're currently a shameless leader?
Ooh, I would say, for me, being a shameless leader is staying focused on the things that matter most to you. So I have an operations role. I love operations. And sometimes I hear people say like, oh, it's just HR or it's just ops, right? Like,
Right.
why aren't we talking about the mission? We need to talk
Mm.
about the mission. And of course we do. But I think what I've come to learn in my multiple experiences is if you don't focus on the people, if you don't get people right, if you don't get the operations right, you don't get the mission right. You don't get it done at all. And so
Yeah.
really staying focused on that, I think has been really important and meaningful for me.
I love that. Thank you for that. Where can people connect with you, follow your work? Uh, if you're participating in any online spaces like LinkedIn, et cetera, feel free to share those. And if you want to give a shout out and any sort of requests to support WWF, please feel free to do that as well.
Thanks. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Loren Mayor. We are just launching a Give an Hour for Earth campaign. So the idea is just take 1 hour out of your time, do something for the planet. It can be as simple as taking a walk and getting outside or gardening or composting. You can find out about it at WWF-US.org. And I encourage everybody to spend a little bit of time for nature.
Okay, so I'm going to, in our show notes, if people go to sarahdean.com/podcast, you'll see this episode with Loren Mayor, and then you can click through and we'll have LinkedIn and then that other URL for the 1 hour for Earth right there. If you're on your podcast app, just scroll down into the show notes and you'll see everything linked right there. Definitely everyone take 1 hour for the Earth as like a thank you to Loren for her time. Get involved in as many other ways as you want. And Loren, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and being so open and forthcoming with the ways that you found success. And especially, I think, sharing methods that can be inspirational in terms of people being able to build a career that feels aligned with their values and that feels driven by impact and legacy. Even if we don't know, when we're starting out exactly where we're going to end up, I think when we can start looking for those through lines, we can get a really clear sense of everything that we're bringing into our roles, as well as all the opportunity that's ahead of us to be able to go build something for ourselves wherever we want to do that. So thank you so much for your time and for being here today.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.